Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. My general take on that as both a Christian who I do believe in peacemaking, even to the point where, again, Christianity, he allowed himself to be killed, or, he allowed that to happen. I also think I believe in a God that it's better to live in a dangerous, free world than a safe, controlled world. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot to that. There's a whole series I could probably do on that. But the reality is I think it's okay to teach self-defense. I think it's okay to defend yourself. I think it's okay to do these things. I also go all the way through and saying, hey, and this is probably again the church conversation, is not everywhere is a time and place. And, we have to be able to take on risk in order to get something bigger, like being extra kind in order to do this stuff. In any case, the school thing is different, I think, than the church thing. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But for me, these places of sanctuary, I don't want them to be places of quote-unquote war. I also think we have to dedicate more resources towards mitigating before the incident happens, and recognizing the difference between a potential domestic violence incident and an act of terror. What is your take on what happened with the Catholic Church in Minnesota versus potentially, I think it was in Texas, where they had an armed guy take out the shooter a couple of years ago? Do you know what I'm talking about?
You're talking about the one in Garland, Texas?
Yeah.
It was a Islamic.
No. It was a Christian church.
Right.
It was an off-duty officer who took out the guy who came in.
Oh, okay. So I thought you were talking about a different event. There was one in Garland, Texas, where Garland PD was around a church, and there was an Islamic extremist that came up to the church in a car and got out with a weapon, and Garland PD officers took him down. So I'm not sure the Texas incident you're talking about. I can't speak to that. I don't know the details of that off the top of my head. But the Minnesota shooting, as tragic as it is, one thing that we talk about is at our church, and when I work with other churches too, is that you've got to push your perimeter out. So before I worked at our church, I was a volunteer on the security team or safety team at our church. So, but I was armed. I was still in law enforcement at the time. And so when you think about it, a lot of times the safety team or the volunteers are inside. They're in the lobby, especially during services. People are coming in. I always like to be on the sidewalk, and I would always stand on the sidewalk out front. If I'm in the lobby and someone comes in, by the time I see them, they're inside now. And if I'm on the sidewalk, I'm looking out into the parking lot. So a lot of people thought I was like a greeter, hey, welcome to church. Thanks for being here. Welcome, everybody. And I would do that a little bit. But I was basically doing it to people that I had a little bit of a red flag about, because I wanted to see if they responded to me. Because
I hope they watch this episode like, oh, you thought I was a red flag?
Yeah. Well, good. But if when I'm looking out into the parking lot, if I can see something that I perceive as a threat while I'm on the sidewalk and they're in the parking lot, I said this just the other day to a group at a church I was working with. And I said, would you think about your house? Would you rather, if you're in bed and you wake up in the middle of the night and someone is there at the door to your bedroom, or someone is at your front door, or someone's at the end of your driveway? Of course you want them farther. You have more time to respond, more distance to respond. It's hard to respond when you wake up and someone's right there. When someone's already inside, if they've made it into the church and into the sanctuary, that's the hardest response. And we don't want to start something inside the building if we can help it. We want to talk to the person and try to get them outside, try to move them outside while we're having the conversation, trying to get them away from everybody else. But back to the church in Minnesota, that shooting happened through the windows from the outside of the building. And, again, I'm not critiquing their operation. I certainly don't know all the details of that event, but that's an instance where had somebody been outside as opposed to everybody inside, that's the reason that we have a perimeter on law enforcement operations. The reason that we have the perimeter is to also protect the people. It's not only just stop people from getting away, but it's to protect the backs of the people that are inside doing what they need to do. But the perimeter, oftentimes, they're looking outward. Right?
Yeah.
The outer perimeter is looking outward. So
funny.
We've got to do that at churches too, is my point.
Yeah, funny enough, I love that you just said that, and I'm going to take that clip and just share it everywhere, because in California, I helped out a little bit with that. I've been asked to do that with other, not just my church, with other congregations and other. I talk about the perimeter, and I haven't used that analogy before. I might steal it, but it's like, why are your greeters, like, for multiple reasons, by the way, why are your greeters like all the way inside the building and not greeting people on the outside? I think you can have multiple wins. From a church perspective, I'm a big fan of having multiple greeters outside, just because that's awesome. You feel good about yourself. It also does create a safety net without having to be the guns blazing safety net. If what is that, like the FBI is like 8 steps to terrorism? If you notice that people are on the outside watching all the time, then your protocol changes, right? You could have also people inside, of course, as additional greeters. But I think it's just a good idea to have them on the outside. 1, it's more friendly. 2, extend your perimeter. 3, for alert and warning. 4, if anything ever happens, and again, it's not an active assailant, people, domestic violence, somebody falls, the elderly person falls on the sidewalk and the service has already started.
That's right.
And now, like, they just need some help, and just nobody's aware of them. And so it's like, you can avoid a lot of stupid just by extending your perimeter a little bit. And again, that's the way I framed it, but I like your analogy a lot more. Are you looking for bleeding control equipment? Impulse by Doberman Bleeding Control equipment is professional grade and built to save lives. From the Responder Pro Sling for first responders to wall-mounted kits with AEDs, compact packs for ushers and security, and the MCI resupply cache for standby teams, get your Impulse kits and training from impulsekits.com. RSET builds immersive virtual reality environments that mirror real-world spaces, giving military and first responders the power to train, analyze, and document with precision. Experience mission-ready simulation with rset.com. Protect your school, venue, facility, or community with Doberman Emergency Management's specialized 3x3 approach. We do this with protecting life, property, and continuity of operations through advanced planning, training, and assessments. Learn more about our cutting-edge approach with world-class professionals in emergency services today at DobermanEMG.com. Emergency management is changing. Are you keeping up? The Readiness Lab takes it to the next level with exclusive tabletop exercises, live sessions, and real-world intel. Access the EOC as a TRL insider, train with us through NLEM, or rep the field with our EMTs. Yeah, that's a pun. We also deliver top-tier marketing and design for emergency services and public safety, outreach, product reviews, trade show support, sponsorships, and more. The Readiness Lab is the #1 emergency services podcast network, home of the NLEM certification, bold outreach, and everything pushing the field forward. Learn more at thereadinesslab.com. Like what you're hearing? Check out our show notes for more details, including the links to each of our sponsors. So
no, I mean, I agree. People outside, again, back to your point about not starting anything inside. We don't want to start a big melee inside the sanctuary during services because we're trying to get somebody out there who decides to stand up and yell at the pastor or something like that. We do try to get him to move it outside. As a matter of fact, okay, I'll tell you if you want to hear a ridiculous, funny story.
believe.
So I've done this a few times now at trainings with churches where we talk about disruptions. So back to that scale of that sort of risk analysis of what is really catastrophic to happen and what is likely to happen. Disruptions are far more likely. The Family Research Council, it does studies on what happens at churches, what types of events. I mean, the most common type of attack on a church is really vandalism. It's something like 75% of the incidents against churches are vandalism, not violent. But disruptions, somebody standing up in a church and yelling at the pastor or causing a scene is much more likely to happen than an active shooter. So I do spend a fair amount of time talking about that with the people on all of our church campuses. We have 8 campuses. And here's the analogy that I give them, partly because I'm trying to make it somewhat entertaining for them, and partly because I'm a big movie buff. But I'll always tell them, hey, let me share with you some words from one of the greatest security experts of all time. And then I put up a picture of Patrick Swayze in the movie Roadhouse, the original movie Roadhouse. So if you remember that movie, right? He's hired to come in as the bouncer and take over and clean up this bar. As cheesy as that movie is, there is wisdom in that movie, because if you watch the scene where he talks to his crew of all these bouncers, he says, look, all you have to do are follow my 3 rules. 1, never underestimate your opponent, right? That's always true. In our world, one of the things I say about that is, because I've seen where we've had a suspicious person in the church, and I've heard people afterwards say, well, at least they weren't armed. And I say, you don't know that. They didn't produce a weapon, but you have no idea whether they were armed or not, because we got them out of there. So that's Patrick Swayze's rule number 1, or Dalton's rule number 1 is never underestimate your opponent. Number 2, he says,
like, hey, you even know his name, Dalton.
Yeah, I do. That's my generation's movie. So number 2, he says, never start anything inside the bar unless absolutely necessary. And I say, just substitute the word church for bar. If you can talk to the person and say, hey, look, let's talk about this outside, get them out of the sanctuary, get them out to the lobby, get them from the lobby into the parking lot, get them out as far as you can, hopefully before anything has to happen, if it even has to happen, but get them out of there. And then the third rule, he said, remember, was be nice. Ask them to leave and be nice about it. If they say no, then you're going to have to kind of escort them out, maybe physically force them out, and be nice. Have somebody else help you. Everybody be nice. And he just said, be nice until it's time to not be nice. So we have kind of a saying that we use, which is, we are pastors first, even on the safety or the security team, because we approach people with that mindset. If someone looks a little bit odd or out of place, something just doesn't look right, I'm not going to immediately go up and tackle them to the ground and assume they're a threat. I'm going to approach them kind of in a pastoral way and say, hey, hey, can we help you today? Have you been here before? I'm Jim. Is this your first time here? And let's, in a conversation, try to figure out what's going on with them. Maybe they just really need help. Maybe that's why they're at church. But you can only be that way until they do something that makes you have to flip that switch and transfer from being a pastor to being the security officer. So that's my little house shout out.
I love that. First of all, great movie. The remake wasn't very good. It was all right.
Agreed.
But what I like to do, I like that. If you say pastoral, I say minister.
Yes.
What I would love to do, exact same thing, right? I say, hey, easiest way you can do to identify and help out the situation is to go and sit with them, right? And preferably sit behind them. If there's a seat behind them, just lean over, like, hey, it's like, hey, I'm John, shake their hand, whatever, but I'm also behind them. And so that makes my life a little bit easier. Sitting beside them is just as probably pretty good too, but sometimes people are going to church because they need that sanctuary, because they want to find that relief. They're really struggling with something.
That's right.
And I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to remove them, as you're calling out. Sometimes they need that space. Now, if it starts to escalate, one of the things that our church was dealing with was for essentially news or social media, someone would go and disrupt, but then they would have other people in the crowd taking video of them, and they wanted people to put hands on them. They wanted the macho person so they could have the social media thing. So law
enforcement deals with that all the time. Everybody's recording your response to the troublemaker, and then that's going to become the story. Right?
Yeah, and so it's like people need also training of like time and place. Again, like, do you need to be kind? Do you need to let the services just go? You say, hey, you're trespassing now. We're calling law enforcement. Everybody, please go home. While we deal with the situation. That's like the extreme situation, but most of the time, I think it can be de-escalated just through a friendly smile. I agree
with you if they haven't done anything yet. But once they stand up and start verbally interrupting,
you're in a whole other ball game now.
Yeah, then it has to be addressed. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you have to address them. I think there's lots of different ways to address it. I'm grateful that a lot of off-duty law enforcement at all levels go to our church. Those are the people that I look to get help. What I don't look for is that member who's like, hey, I care about security, so I'm going to be Rambo. And you're like, hey, you have no formal training.
Yeah.
You have like this weird sick fantasy that you can be this hero. I don't need your help. In
Yeah.
fact, you're the red flag right now for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So it's funny you say that. I've seen that at churches, and I've talked to people about it where you got the person that's guarding, let's say, the children's area, right? You got the person that's guarding the children's area, and they're standing there like they're guarding the door to an entrance to a club in Manhattan Saturday night. Like nobody's getting in there. Speaking of bouncers and Roadhouse.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be that way. If somebody suspicious comes up and is trying to get into the kids area, I want you to have that defensive, but you don't need to be that way to the kids. But I've seen people
that scares the kids.
It scares the kids. It's just, you don't need to, you can just take it down a couple notches,
Yeah. And also the parents too is like, why do you feel, is there something I don't know about or that you're having to do this? We've even had people, it was several years ago, this person had committed a pretty heinous crime, went to jail for decades, got out, started going to church, and because of that, they had done everything they were supposed to in order to be in a safe space. Now, they also told us about their past. We knew everything, and we put certain things in place in order to discourage any idea of doing anything ever again. Mm-hmm. However, they still were able to come to church. Now, all that stuff was very quiet, and so nobody had to feel about it. But I think it is appropriate to, hey, kids are going to the bathroom. Are the parents going with them? That kind of stuff. And so, again, it goes back onto family is the number one responsibility to educate. Then it goes down to churches and schools, and then the community at large. The worst one for me is when government feels like it has to mandate safety because, one, they implement it the most poorly, but also mandates is very different than a cultural norm of safety and peace.
Yeah, and I don't know. There are some things that we need. There are policies and regulations and laws that we need to maintain order and cohesion and to try and do the best good for the most people. But there are also instances where speaking as a retired, someone with 30 years in federal government, that someone in the government, in a local community government or state government or federal government, that you think that if anybody thinks they have a greater interest in your child's safety than you do, that's a mistake. They don't. They're not going to they wouldn't put themselves at risk for your child. No bureaucrat is going to put themselves at risk for your child. There are obviously ulterior motives in a lot of cases, sometimes financial, sometimes cultural, political, whatever. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. The parents, we are all our really own first responders. And when it comes to your kids, that's your primary responsibility, is to be a protector and an educator and a guide and spiritual leader and all that. So you're right. There are a lot of policies when it comes to schools. Schools are interesting because depending on who's running your school board, the policies they put in place may be antithetical to your child's safety. And so those are things that it's right for parents to get involved in all that, and they should.
What is that phrase? I'm trying to remember it correctly. There's no such thing as collateral damage when it comes to your family. And so I'll kind of just leave it at that. There is a God in heaven. There is a devil in hell. And luckily for all of us, one doesn't even compare to the other. I really do believe that in justice and in mercy, and I believe in being a peacemaker and in mitigation and all these things. Yeah. I also think it's incredibly wise to live in a free, dangerous world and a controlled, safe world.
No, I believe that too. And something you said earlier when you were talking about the Bible, and you don't wish for violence. That's true. I agree with you. but something that a lot of people either don't understand or haven't really thought about, or maybe don't know the difference. The sixth commandment does not say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not murder. There are legitimate reasons, self-defense being perhaps chief among them, to take a human life. If someone tries to hurt my family and it takes me killing them to stop them, then that's what's going to happen. And people in law enforcement for the most part understand that. People in the military understand that there are legitimate and legal, by the way, uses of deadly force, which is another one of my favorite subjects to talk about, is police use of force, but which is a whole nother issue. But people have to understand that it's not anti-Christian to believe in using deadly force to protect you, your family, your church, your community. It's not. Otherwise, we wouldn't give police officers and military the ability to defend the community, defend the country.
Yeah, I agree. I also, I'm looking at the time here. We'll probably wrap it up. My thought process is, what can I do as a peacemaker, not as somebody who lays down on their sword constantly, but as a peacemaker, and as somebody who understands mitigation before that incident happens. I would much rather figure out the long game of how to help somebody before they got to the point where they thought this is my only option.
Sure.
And I think needs to be a whole conversation about that as well. But Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show, for talking to me. This might be like a 6-part episode. Who knows? This is a long one, but I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated by your intakes, your takes, and honestly, all your experience. So thanks so much for taking the time with me.
It was a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time.
All right, everybody. If you got something out of these episodes, I'm going to have to say that because I think it is a long one. Might be a long one. Who knows? But it was really great content. If you got something out of it, give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. If you have a question specifically for Jim, you can email us at contact@thereadinesslab.com. We'll forward on to him. If you've done something that has helped your church, your school, your community, whatever, reduce the impact of active shooters, whatever it may be, we would love to know what it is in social media, and especially to all those in law enforcement who have to deal with this stuff up close and personal. We wish you the best of luck, Godspeed, and stay safe. We'll see you for the next one. Peace.